Jennifer, welcome to the Writer Center's virtual craft chats, where we talk to authors a little bit less about what they wrote, a little more about how they wrote it. And I would love for you to start by reading a few pages of Places We Left Behind.
Thank you so much for having me. And this is really meaningful because I got to meet Amy in person at a big writing conference back in March in Seattle, AWP. And, it just beats the virtual aspect of all of this. So I'm going to read from the second chapter. My chapters are teeny tiny. Everything about this book is teeny tiny, and I'm 5'1" and I'm teeny tiny. So the fact that and also the whole book.
Okay, you didn't tell me any of that beforehand, but we'll get into it. Okay.
Okay. So, conjunctions. After making love on his mismatched sheets, Philippe and I tally how many times we've each been to Israel. I count my trips. 1971, 1975, 1981, 1983, 1984, 1985, 1988, now in 1989, meeting both hands. He counts his on one hand, 3. You win, he says, as if we're competing. I scan his room. No posters, no mirror, no nightstand. So boyish and beautiful, especially his bed. Tell me everything, he says, adorning me with butterfly light kisses. My tendency to share too much too soon makes me hesitate. He already knows that I'm here in Israel, despite the first Intifada or Palestinian uprising, between a job in France and graduate school in New York, to immerse in Hebrew as well as to spend time with my only sibling and extended family, and that I miss my open-minded California-born parents in the San Francisco Bay Area, but he has no idea that I made a Jackson Pollock mess of my love life the past 2 years and promised my mother that I wouldn't fall in love and stay. No, wait, I want to know why you're here, I say, running my fingers through his silky chestnut hair. What made you immigrate? Israeli chutzpah, Haifa, the Mediterranean, the beach, body surfing, falafel, spicy food. Plus, my brother plans to make Aliyah, too. We each have one sibling. Mine immigrated to Jerusalem, my temporary home base, immediately after college a few years earlier. And since Aliyah comes from the verb la'alot, he says, which means to go up, I went up in my Jewish observance. Tu comprends? Do I understand that he changed his lifestyle for a country? Absolutely not. All weekend I study this man, admiring how his pointy nose dominates an angular face, his olive skin glistens with oily patches, and his feet have white lines underneath his sandal straps. All weekend he reaches for me, amorous and solicitous of my attention. Ever since we met at a Shabbat retreat for Francophones 144 hours earlier, I haven't stopped thinking about him, convinced my secular mother will tell me it was Beshert, Yiddish for destiny, after enrolling me in a pilot French program when I was 6. Philippe fits every box on my imaginary list. French, check. Jewish, check. Smart, check. Single, check. Sexy with a guarded smile, check. A far cry from the men of late. One Catholic Parisian whom Sib refused to acknowledge. One Russian married man whom my parents refused to discuss. One once upon a time college friend who refused to commit. Burrowed in Philippe's biceps, I try to block out the conjunction. If he wasn't Sabbath observant, and he wasn't enwrapped with his new homeland, but he is.
Okay, I just want to asterisk something. When you said Besheret, which I know because I'm a Jew, came across in the captions as the sheriff. So I just want to footnote, because we're going to talk about the language, because you have 3 languages in your book. We're going to talk about that, but I just want to bookmark that you said Bashert. I know what it means because of my history. And it came across in captions as the sheriff.
Okay.
So, okay, so we'll get back to that, but I'm really interested in your use of language. Okay, so all right, back to my questions, which I prepared beforehand. So, in your own words, who the heck are you?
In my own words, what?
Who the heck are you?
I am born in the San Francisco Bay Area, to be specific, and I'm very proud of it, Berkeley, if you know the area. I was raised in a small little city called Piedmont, very, very, very not Jewish, surrounded by Oakland on all sides in the 1960s and 70s, and grew up as not a traditional Jew, grew up as a Reform Jew, and pulled out of school for the major holidays and only went to school with matzah sandwiches over the week of Passover. And there were maybe 5 kids in my grade who were Jewish. It was very hard to be different. I always felt other and othered. My mom came in starting in kindergarten with the book of Hanukkah, the story of Hanukkah, an electric griddle, the mix for the potato pancakes, the menorah to light and the candles, and dreidel to play dreidel, to celebrate and share our differences. And I guess growing up at some point, I realized nobody's mom came in to talk about Christmas. Everybody just knew what that was in my world. And, people ask, how did my brother and I both end up in Israel? And I kind of think, well, it might have had something to do with that upbringing, growing up just feeling really different. However, something really important, 2 things. We did not grow up in a God-based household. This was not a religious home. This was a cultural home, a culturally Jewish home with Eastern European grandparents on my dad's side. A lot of Yiddish coming down through the generations, and 2 of my grandmother's siblings they came from Romania, dirt poor, illiterate, uneducated in the early 1930s, Romania to San Francisco because there was distant family. And in 1947, 2 moved to Israel, Palestine. So we grew up with very strong connections to this land. And my first trip, I was 5, and then I was 10, and then I was 15, and so on and so on. So a really interesting upbringing in a way. And I write, and I didn't study English in college.
So let's jump to the book, Places We Left Behind, and let's talk about the structure, because we're here to talk about how you did what you did with this book. For people on the chat who have not read the book, but you should, describe the structure because it's kind of super cool.
I did something I've never done before. I'm going to jump back in time and say that I did an MFA, which not everybody has to do to write a book, but I did an MFA at Vermont College of Fine Arts, 2014 to 2016. And my third semester mentor, Barbara Hurd, she was a nature writer, nothing I write about at all, but she kept talking to me about playing on the page and being nimble-minded. And I don't think I understood any of what she was suggesting to me at the time. And she tried to teach it to me. Fast forward.
Excuse me. So can you talk a little bit more about what you mean by that? By nimble mind, what did you think at the time?
I know that I'm very anal. I'm a Virgo, late August birthday, Virgo, anal, pedantic, structured, control freak. I would sometimes come with the idea of a structure of an essay before I had my content. I kind of work ass backwards in a way. Most people would get the words out and have the story down, and then they would work on the structure. I would come in from the opposite place. So, so nimble-minded was to free myself from, I have to do it this way, to just let go a little bit, which was not easy for me. That's present tense. It is not easy for me to let go of my desire for control. And that often came across as control the structure in the essay. And playing on the page, I didn't know what she meant. So one thing she gave me as a prompt to start learning was to do an essay where I did 2 long sentences, and I mean long, and 1 short. 2 long, 1 short. 2 long, 1 short. So I have a piece that's published. It's on the Citron Review. It's a literary journal, and it's called Boxed In. I don't have the link easy, but I can get it to you to share, where I did exactly what she said. An entire essay, not a long essay, it's under 1,000 words, but it has a narrative. It's got a beginning, a middle, and end following this pattern. And it was really cool. I'd never done anything like that before. So,
but I mean, this kind of blows my mind because your book is not traditionally structured, and I'd like you to share with everybody what the structure of your book is and how you went from being type A to writing this, just incredibly roller coastery, but I mean, not like woo, but relaxing roller coaster. Is that a thing? Okay, so that is like a water log ride.
okay. So I
A
call
lazy river. A lazy river. There we go.
I call my book experimental prose. So I left my Master's of Fine Arts in writing with the beginning of an idea to write a memoir of my marriage. This is a memoir of my marriage. This is really a memoir of identity, my identity within that marriage. And I had this really, really long-winded 90,000 word, overwritten, boring, flat prose manuscript.
Oh, I've got one of those.
I think a lot of people do, where I didn't even want to turn the page. I was bored when I was working on it. So, but I reached a point at I don't know how many thousands of words, 60,000. I hired an editor thinking I'm going to just, keep moving forward. I hired a developmental editor. She gave me 7 pages of comments. And one of the things in the comment is, and after you read this, put it away. Don't try to work on it right now. And I put it away. And I put it away for months. And then I took a class on how to write fast flash. It's called Fast Flash. It's with Kathy Fish. It's an online class. It's 2 weeks, 10 days, Monday through Friday, in an asynchronatic form, which was a word we were not using, but pre-COVID, where you're not chiming in at the same time. Everyone was reading each other's work and giving feedback, and everything I was doing was it was very compressed, under 500 words. And I was writing about my little Israeli life, what I call my little Israeli life. And the feedback I was getting from my peers was extraordinary. You should be writing a memoir in Flash. So it started from there, where I started to work in compressed prose, because let me just say this, Amy, I started to see the heart of the story more clearly. I had lost the heart of the story, the narrative. I couldn't find my arc in that long-winded manuscript.
Okay, so I want to slow this down because you've said so many things that I want to unpack. So Kathy Fish is a fantastic Flash writer instructor. Let's just put that out there. And Flash, if you don't know, is 1,000 words or less, and there's micro Flash, and like it gets smaller and smaller. But as someone said, I wanted to write you a short letter, but I didn't have the time. Right. So the idea is that compressing your story into fewer and fewer words is extremely challenging. Mm-hmm. So and given that this is a memoir miniature, I'd love for you to talk about how you went from 90,000 to being like, okay, wait, Flash. Like, what is the nugget I'm trying to get at here? Because I think that's what Flash is about, right?
Yeah. I mean, the story's long and I don't want to bore anyone, but so do you remember, if anyone read Helen McDonald's memoir called H is for Hawk? It came out around this time, 2018, I think, Story of Loss. And I read what's called a call for submissions, a literary journal from England called Dyslexia. And this came on the heels of my first Flash class with Kathy Fish. It was a call for submission for J is for ... You could say J is for Jennifer, but that's not what it was for. And I immediately thought of a word buried in my 90,000 word manuscript, jury, where my husband and I, married 20 years and 3 days, were sitting on the sofa in our sunroom in our 100-year-old house in White Plains, New York, where we'd been living, deliberating about our marriage like a jury of 2. And I went in thanks to Word, thanks to Find, and I found that word and I pulled it out of, I think, a 3,000 word chapter. And I brought it down to under, I think, 300 words, because that was what Miss Lexia, the literary journal in England, asked for. And in compressing it from 3,000 something to 300, it sizzled. Like I was blown away by my writing. I felt something. And so it went from there. I went forward in time following Miss Lexia. I didn't start it right then. It wasn't a light bulb. It was the next month was K is for. And I went in and I found the word kosher. And the next month was L. And then I went back on my own and went to A and to B and to C. And I ended up with this very organic, unequal number of chapters written different letters of the alphabet. I don't know. I had 5 for A and 2 for B and 15 for C. I don't know. I don't remember. And I completely revamped my manuscript, which let me lose a lot of excess, trim a lot of stuff that wasn't necessary. So
okay. We have to go out for drinks after this. But for people who haven't yet read your book, read the book, buy the book, write reviews, give us a structure. That's my dog. Can you guys hear her? Good. Okay.
Miss Lexia, by the way, is Myslexia. Let me just start with that because someone just posted a question. Myslexia. It's a literary journal coming out of England, London. I don't know.
And we would love your questions. If you can put the word question in front of the question, I am much more likely to see it. But apparently Jennifer is on the chat. So, okay. So
I went from this 90,000 word manuscript. At some point, I think with this reorganization using the letters, I got to 60,000 words. I still didn't like it. I just continued to put it away. I would bring it out, I'd put it away. When I put it away for months. And I learned that during my MFA from different mentors. Put your work away for a while because you get to a point where you can't see it anymore, right? You're just swimming in your own words. So this is a long story, Amy. So I'm really, really, really sorry. I'm trying to stay on track.
I don't be sorry. I'm enjoying this. Keep going.
Okay. So I put it away. So then also around the same time as that first flash class in 2018, I had swapped my huge manuscript with a friend who I'm actually staying with right now in San Rafael, California. We did our MFA together and we gave each other very honest feedback. And during her honest feedback to me in January of 2018, she said, I think you're asking the wrong question. I don't think this is the story of your marriage. And that was something Barbara Hurd had also said to me in 2016 when I was in school, that I was asking the wrong question.
I have to ask you from a craft perspective, what is that about?
When you write memoir, you're trying to answer a question. You might not know that question.
Whose question? Are you asking your question you're asking yourself? Who's the voice there?
It's the narrator. The narrator is trying to answer a question. You don't necessarily know that question before you get to the end. You definitely don't know the answer, I think. I'm not sure anyone knows the answer until they've reached the end of the journey. So I'm trying to get myself back. When my friend gave me that feedback, I realized that I understood what she was saying to me, that it wasn't my marriage that I should be writing about, but my journey that started in 2011 upon landing in Israel, back with my family, my third time trying to live there, my finding home, my 7-year journey that actually took place a lot on a yoga mat from 2011 to 2018. This is not that. This is not that. This 7-year journey is a book coming out October 15th, 2024 called Landed, a yogi's memoir in pieces and poses. I started that anew. Everything I just told you, I put away. I started anew. And I started writing in short chapters immediately. And I left all the early part of our story behind. And then while I was shopping that manuscript around, it's about 45,000 words. Another writer friend, a woman who she's turning 80 this year. We've never met. She lives in San Diego. We were swapping work for years. She emailed me one day in 2020 and she said, I'm entering my work, nonfiction, into prose, nonfiction chapbook competitions. I think you should think of doing the same. You should look at your material and see what you have that you can connect by theme. And so I went back into the early part of my marriage from 89 to 2011, because at that point I had already separated, started anew and had a different manuscript starting in 2011, my journey. I went back into the early work. I pulled it out. I compressed and compressed and compressed. And I started to submit under a different title to chapbook competitions. And kind of 6, 7, 8 months into a lot of rejection, I was a finalist in a contest. But I'm so sorry. I really can't tell a concise story. It's why I write. And so the summer before that November competition result, I was reading all of the call for submissions for the chapbook competitions, kind of nearing the end of where I could submit this tiny manuscript. And I saw the word experimental prose. And I was like, wow, I wonder what that means. and then I remembered that someone had given me feedback.
That you wrote that.
Then I remembered someone had given me feedback. Wow, I wish I'd seen your pro-con list when you were debating whether you should move in with your boyfriend or not. And I went back and I recreated it to the best of my ability. And then I went into my text where I took my boyfriend, my husband, Philippe, through the old city of Jerusalem, zigzagging through the alleys to get from one gate to the Western Wall. And I spread it on the page like a poet, but I'm not a poet. I know nothing of poetry. I don't even know what enjambment means. I do know what stanza means. So I started to play with my text to mirror the content. And because one of my biggest pet peeves as a reader is repetition, to avoid my own repetition of my conflict with my husband, I started to think, how could I say it differently? And I realized that I could use some graphics.
Okay, so we are a half an hour into this, and I want to bring you all the way back to the question for people who haven't read your book. What is the structure? Because when you talk about like running through alleyways and stuff, I'm like, that's the book, but I've read it. So but describe the structure of your book, please.
So the structure is linear. On the one hand, the structure is linear and simple from 1989 to 2011. But I am playing with the prose. I found the play. I use strike-throughs. I use endnotes. Everything that is Judaism, that is technical, or yoga, that is like kind of, I want someone to understand just how much was involved in becoming a yoga teacher, just how much I had to memorize. It's in endnotes at the bottom of each page. I didn't want to keep it in the text to take away from the story, but I want the reader to know. And I use the endnotes for my own snarky comments. And I'm not snarky. I'm not a snarky person, but I love snark when I read. I love pithy writers, self-deprecating. So I was using the comments to make comments on my own text, which, as someone pointed out to me, well, that's interesting. That's what the rabbis did centuries ago in Judaism. That's commentary in Judaism. So because I don't really know a lot about my own religion, I was like, oh, wow, that's cool. That wasn't intentional. So I'm doing a lot of outside the box things. I call it my unconventional book because it's very unconventional. It is 13,000 words. A full book.
I was going to ask you the word count. That's it.
13,000. It's a book with a full-on binding. It's not a chapbook. And it's got a lot of play. And I can't go backward. I'm bored with traditional prose now. I can't write normally anymore.
13,000 words? Someone else throw in a question because my mind has just been blown. Okay. So you take us through this. I love thinking about the book because it's about your journey through you're American, your husband's French. There's a Hebrew-Israeli thread. You're living all over the world, bouncing from here to there, in terms of your relationship, but also the book. And I love the description of running through alleys. So 13,000 words, really? Wow, well done you. So how did you decide? So there are checklists, there are prose, there are crossouts, there are paragraphs, there's poetry. How did you decide how to write this thing? And how many times did you revise it? Who worked with you? How did that happen? How'd you
Everything
find the
that
rhythm?
everything that became the version that you see when you buy the book, and please go buy the book and please leave me a review.
You know, I'm going to interrupt you because this is a really good question from Michelle's. Can you give us a visual of the interior?
Yeah, I can try. Could have done this ahead of time. I could have done like shared screen. Let me start with this. My first chapter. My first chapter
Okay,
is
there we go. There we go.
my
Okay.
first chapter is a flow chart. And this is Word. I didn't hire a designer. This is everything I could learn. Thank you to YouTube tutorials about Word, how to do this in Word. So
Okay,
I
perfect.
so I take the first paragraph. I'll just read it. For my first 18 years is the title. I sleep in the same room opposite my parents in the same house, 116. I use a lot of parentheses also. 116 Monticello Avenue in the same city, Piedmont, in the same state, California, in the same country, USA. But soon after leaving for college in Evanston, Illinois, I pine for elsewhere and end up peripatetic. And I use this flow chart to show what happened starting from the monumental, the moment where I started to question home, which was my junior year abroad in Paris, 1985-86. And I give the year, hold on. I give the year, and then I say where I was, and then I say kind of why I was there. So 1987, uproot to Paris for first job after college. 1989, quit job and uproot to Israel, meet P, live together, get engaged. And then I keep going and I flow through time. Oops, this way. Okay, I can't do it that way.
No, that's a good visual. So that
Yeah.
brings me back to AWP when we met. And you said we could talk a lot about hybrid. It's not
Yeah.
it's a hybrid book. I don't well, I mean this is a book, but like how did you create this from flowchart? I mean, it really works from flowchart to prose to crossouts.
So it's really bringing Barbara Hurd's voice. Learn to play on the page. Like it's the ultimate of nimble-minded and playing on the page. And I up until this book, I used to be very, very, very dependent on writer friends for feedback, never having confidence. I would say that the turning point for me here professionally as a writer is that I did this all by myself and I didn't need anyone's input. I think I understood I was onto something.
So how did you decide how to go from one format to another? And we're talking about very few words, but powerful shifts between
The
poetry,
only word,
prose.
Amy, the only word I can use is organic and innate. I don't know how to.
I am also a yogi. I understand. It was a flow.
It's not so much that it was a flow. I was forcing the
Oh, come
play
on. I thought that was brilliant. Never mind.
I was forcing the play in the beginning, but then it just started to happen organically. So, for example, let me see if I can find it quickly.
And please throw your questions into the chat if you'd like to.
This is a chapter called Calculation. Can you see that?
Nope. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Closer. Okay, almost. It's like looking for the afikoman. There we go. Okay, got it.
This is called Calculation. So I write 6 years in Israel plus 14 years in America equals, and I show this scale that again, somehow I found it, a balance, a scale, like where something isn't weighing equally to show that I got my fair share of time in America with my French husband who never wanted to live there. And we never went for 14 years. We went for 2, and it just kept becoming more and more and more. And there was an incredible imbalance that happened. And with that imbalance in where we were living, there was something going on with our shared religion as well. We had an unspoken, if I got country, he got religion. So we were raising our kids as modern Orthodox Jews in America, but I was hating it the entire time. I loathed my children's education. So there was a lot of stuff going on, but I knew I didn't want to tell the reader again what that imbalance was in prose. I felt like it was boring. It was hitting the reader over the head with repetition. So I wanted to say it differently.
Okay, so publishing is an industry, and I am speaking from the Writers Center, but I also don't know what I'm talking about publishing in this respect. That I think that there's a word count, and it's like, to me, when I saw your book, which has different colors in the flow chart and images and stuff, and like, does that affect the decision when they publish? Don't they want like X number of words and X number of like the font? And how did you get this published in the way you wanted it to look?
So I'll say, okay, so this is with Vine Leaves Press. It is, I already knew about them because I had read for me to see small books, I read two books, one by Alexis Page and one by Penny Gissinger. They were both tiny, and they're called, according to this press, called Collection of Vignettes. So I knew who I was targeting when I sent them my manuscript. So in the end, they don't call this a collection of vignettes. This for them is pure memoir. The fact that they took me on, this is a traditional publisher, small independent publisher. The fact that they took me on, I mean, the acceptance email came with like this love letter about what I had done experimentally. So I'm dealing with people who are open-minded, and I needed that. I will also say, it doesn't read as well on the Kindle. They don't have control over the Kindle format. And so I worked a lot in the typesetting of this. I mean, they did it, but then I had to really have a good eye when we were looking at the first printing of it. And we had many, many, many things. I mean, just from the Hebrew, it was backwards. Like, the simple stuff became difficult.
Oh gosh. Okay. We haven't even talked about language. Okay. So
right. So it was real. So you can read the Kindle version, but I actually really recommend to get the print, because the print book is much better than the Kindle.
okay, so let's go back to the appearance of the book, which is non-traditional, which is hybrid, and you've got English, French, and Hebrew. And I have all the questions about that. Let me ask you okay, so let's talk about language for a moment. I'm turning the page, okay? I'm turning the page. If you want more questions about publishing, put them in the chat. But I'm also interested in the way, turning the page, the way you go between English and French and Hebrew sometimes in phonetic spelling and sometimes in Hebrew alphabet, or the alphabet. How did that work in terms of your deciding what to explain for the reader, and then again, how to decide with your publisher what to write in what language?
So I think the first thing I need to say is my marriage is trilingual. My life is trilingual on a daily basis. We speak Frenglish at home. I speak English. My husband speaks French. I'm fluent in French. He's fluent in English. It works. We raise kids like that. In a way, our kids actually don't have a mastery of any language because of it, but that's a different topic. I think Hebrew is cool looking on the page. I don't like to read or write it because I'm kind of at kindergarten level, but I think it's really neat. So, okay, let me go back. In 2018, I heard this woman speak and bought her memoir. It's called Belonging, Nora Krug, a German. Oh, yeah. Nora, she's a German woman living in America, married. She's non-Jewish, living in America, married to a Jewish man. She is an illustrator, and she wrote an illustrated memoir, a term I'd never heard before. I bought the book. I started giving it to everyone's presence. It's the most beautiful thing I have ever beheld. And
Excuse me, was it like a graphic? What was it? What do you mean?
I don't have it here to show.
But just like, was it?
It's
I'm
colorful.
picturing a graphic novel, but I don't think that's
No,
what you mean.
it's not a graphic novel. It's really unique. Her name is Nora Krug, Krug. Someone just asked. It's called Belonging. And every page is different. You feel like you are holding a book that was written for you that no one else could possibly have. It's that unique.
Okay. I'm just going to end this chat and go look that up.
And I think that affected me somewhere. Plus, in graduate school, we read a graphic memoir called Fun Home by Alison Bechdel. And then we heard her. And then I saw it on Broadway in Manhattan. And I cried as I saw this memoir being played out on a stage because it's powerful. Graphic memoir. So a lot was going on influence-wise. So what was the question? Language. So language. And so I wanted something unique. I was out there. I wanted to play and find the play, and I had so much fun with the last part of this, which was this organic thing that was flowing out of me. And using Hebrew and French became part of that play. But it's also a reflection of my marriage and my daily life.
But I mean, as putting on my Writer Center hat, where we have a lot of creative writing workshops, the question of how to handle foreign languages, but my daughter's school doesn't call it foreign languages anymore because that's supposed to be othering, so it's world languages. But you have, and I have page numbers, which I won't put here, but they're how do you judge where to explain what a word means? Like there's don't disturb yourself. I mean, there are times you explain what it means, times you don't, times you transliterate, times you don't. How did you find that balance?
So first of all, I also teach creative writing, Israel Writer Studio. So I also come across this because I don't have all native English. I know you can't use the word. I don't have all English speakers in my classes. So this comes up a lot. So I'm going to go back to the passage I read from the second chapter. I write in French, tu comprends? And then I write, do I understand that he changed his lifestyle for a country? I just felt like so many people might understand tu comprends without ever studied French, right? It's a verb that I think people can get away with. For me, it's an innate thing. What do I think needed to be translated? What do I think I could say differently and answer through my own writing in English to let someone know that that's what I'd said in French or Hebrew? It's just decision making one by one. I treated them individually. I don't have an across the board answer for you. And I'm sorry about that because it would make
no, I wouldn't expect one. I think it's a really interesting issue that writers face. Where do you spoon feed things that the reader can actually handle? Especially when it's part of your experience.
Right. So again, I use the footnotes if I felt like someone needed more about the word I used. Or I have my father-in-law, I quote my father-in-law who really doesn't speak English, and I give the beautiful idiomatic expression that he taught me about one man's garbage is another man's treasure. I can't remember the translation. I did not want to, I wanted it to be out there in French because in French it's beautiful. And when you translate it into English, it's really not. So I decided there to use it in the end note. I just, again, one by one, what made sense to me, what I as the reader would like, when I would want the story to be stopped and translated and when I didn't.
No, but you had a press that supported you, which and please throw your questions in the chat. I see comments, but throw your questions in, please. And I appreciate the people who write question really big for those of us who formerly had cataracts. But at the Writer Center, I talk to a lot of people who publish with big publishers, independent presses, small press, vanity presses. But it sounds like you had a lot of autonomy in deciding how this should look. And I can't
Yeah.
swear because my boss is here, but it effing worked, right? But did you have, what was your path to publication, and how did this relationship work other than successfully?
Half the publication bumpy, uh,
Was
tremendous
it?
rejection. Yeah, tremendous rejection. You cannot do this unless you can handle that.
Okay,
Somewhere
so hang on. So did you try to go the traditional route, or
for like a second, I tried to find an agent for about 1 second. No agent wants. Look, I'm writing about a part of the world. I'll just put it out there. I'm writing about a country on the planet Earth that is extremely controversial and in the media more than it should be, and I already knew that I was up against that. So the fact that my small independent press is not American based does not surprise me. It's an American woman in Munich, Germany, and an Australian woman in Athens, Greece. It's like a nomadic press, and that is befitting on every level for me. So, I mean, at one point, I submitted the manuscript to a small American press, and the email back when I gave the summary of what the book was about in the query letter, the email back to me to acknowledge that she got the document, the
I know
email
I'm gonna
was,
hate this.
yeah, we don't believe in ethnic cleansing, da 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 da. And so when the rejection came a couple months later, I was like, well, I didn't really need that rejection. I kind of got it already when she acknowledged, the receipt of my email. So that's what I was up against. And um, and I just kept going because a huge part of being in this game is persistence, perseverance, call it what you want. Keyword, first word, put it on a bumper sticker and put it in front of your desk.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean,
I mean, you have to believe in yourself, you know, and in your work.
you do, and what is good isn't always marketable. Okay, that's a whole other discussion. Let me get to the chat. Juliet, thank you for the all caps question. Did you do research for the project, such as a genealogical, historical, or was it such as genealogical, historical, was all from your experience and imagination? Which is
Okay.
especially interesting given that it was memoir, but
So
you
there's a
know,
lot of research because, so for example, let's just go to this.
I'm leaning forward to see what you're bringing up.
Cocoon. On September 13th, 1993, we bring home our 4-day-old son from the hospital. With the crib in one room and oodles of baby presents in another, our spacious apartment bursts. Philippe urges me to rest, but I can't. All I want to do is gaze down at my infant and up at the television screen. On CNN, Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin and PLO leader Yasser Arafat extend arms for the first public handshake between the archenemies with US President Bill Clinton at their sides. I'm not going to continue reading, but I went back to that moment in Washington, D.C. near you when the Oslo Accords was being signed and this handshake was happening with my 4-day-old son in my lap, watching
4 days old.
4 days old, which as I was watching from my apartment in Haifa, Israel. And it's something that still makes me teary. It was such a huge event. And I went back and I listened to the speeches. I listened to every word that Clinton said. I listened to Rabin. I listened to Arafat. I listened to everything. And it's in there. So I did that for everything that has to do with the history of where I live and the politics that I might have mentioned, because the political and the personal where I live are absolutely like this, inseparable. And even though I don't consider myself political, I had to have these things in and I had to check my facts on every level. I went back to listen to the sound of the air raid siren because when I was 25 years old, 4 months into my new marriage, we were running for shelter during the first Gulf War, waking up in the middle of the night and hearing this sound that I'd never heard in my life. And I went back and listened on YouTube to the sound of the siren.
Wolf Blitzer, the Scud Stud.
What?
it was a memory. I mean, it was the American version of the memory of that, how that was televised.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
uh, okay, I'm gonna pull myself back to my questions, the craft questions, because that's why we're here to talk about the craft. Um, so one thing people are always interested in and is what your writing life is like. Do you, because there are people who are like, I want to write this many words a day. I don't write every day. I write what I want. And you've created this little gem, 13,000 words, just blew my mind. But what is your writing practice like?
So for the past year, I've gone from full-time writer to full-time publicist, booking
Mm.
events. I'm in California, where I'm from, for 3 weeks and navigating the Jewish holidays. And there's, a large Jewish content, but there's also just a story of a woman who lost her voice and tried to get her voice back. So it's not just a Jewish book at all. It's a woman's story. And I have put together, between talks like this and live events, I think I have, let's say, 15. And then I go to New York, where we lived for 10 years and raised kids. And I have a very similar schedule over a 2-week period. And then I go to France and meet my husband. And that took about a year to,
That's very much like your book.
yeah. But it took about a year to do all this. I didn't hire someone. I felt like no one understands where I'm from and who I know better than me. And I leaned very, very, very heavily on friends who stayed in America and who are maybe involved in their yoga community, or yoga teachers, which I am, and there's a lot of yoga in here, or in the Jewish community, or in the academic world. I'm in a conversation tonight at what's called the Jewish Community Library in San Francisco with an old camp friend who teaches at San Francisco State. And he doesn't teach a Jewish topic, but we're in conversation and have a ton of old camp friends coming. So it's really exciting. So I've become a publicist and learned a whole new craft, a whole new field. And I teach. And so I'm also always marketing my classes and sitting down with students and teaching. Israel Writer Studio.
What kind of writing do you teach? Memoir?
No, not really. Because I live in a non-English speaking country, I can't really just cater to memoir, even though that's my pet topic, if you will, or my genre. Everything is open genre. Everything, always open genre, open level. And I run small classes from my home around my dining room table. One class is actually writing our roots. A lot of people have really interesting root story. Everybody has, really.
What do you mean by that?
So it's a class that started pre-pandemic in a museum called the Museum of the Jewish Diaspora. It's since changed its name. And we would go to the classroom and then put our stuff down and go up into different exhibits that I had spent time in. And I would ask them to do certain things in the exhibit. And then we'd go back into the classroom and we would write. And it would be tied to the exhibit. Pandemic came along, shut us down, and I took the class home. So I don't need the exhibits. I had the class all done, all of my own work. So I just teach it without the museum. Looking at family tradition, customs, culture, why people live in Israel. Not everyone's Jewish at all. Religion, home. Those are the main, fabulous topics.
So in your workshops, you do something together first and then write?
Yeah, all my workshops are generative. They're all prompt based. So we do 2 weeks on family tree, but not traditional family tree. So I have big paper and crayons and markers, and we're looking at different, spending time on immediate family and getting into who our immediate family is, and maybe professions, born, education, moves that they made, and then looking at our parents, how they maybe got together, if they stayed together, and then looking at sibling. And then the next week it goes out to grandparents. And, when you're talking about the Jewish people, there's tremendous movement. There's, it's a people who've been on the move. So I'm addressing that.
Okay, so I think we have about 6 minutes left. I'm going to take Juliet's question and then a couple of writers that are standards. So, no, we're going to take, okay. So Juliet asks, who do you read, and has your book been translated into Hebrew, and how has it been received in Israel? And I'll ask if it's been translated into French as well.
So the book came out September 5th, and I didn't even see it until I got here September 18th. And I am bringing, thank you. I am bringing about 100 books back if I can carry them to Israel. You couldn't pre-order it on Amazon to Israel. You couldn't pre-order it outside of America, Canada, US.
I'm sorry, why not?
Because Amazon. I don't know. I don't know the answer.
What, really?
Yeah, you couldn't pre-order. Now you can get it. It had to release first, and now
but pre-orders are important. So they do something like country-wise.
Yes, like I had a friend in Berlin. She tried to get it and she couldn't get it. Friend in France, she couldn't get it. So like I don't know how that works. I'm bringing the book back. I don't have so much of an interest in Hebrew because I wouldn't be able to understand it myself, and because the language is really important to me. I spent so much time on word choice. I wouldn't be able to even read it. So, but French definitely interests me, and I hope one day it'll be translated into French.
That's so interesting to me to translate a book into French, which is about an American and Hebrew. I mean, just like the meta experience of how you translate something that is about language as well. But all right, we'll talk more after this is over. So one more question: what was your revision process like? Were most of the experimental pieces already in the first draft, or did you go back and create more? And I would say, I'm not sure that, I mean, did you look at it as pieces? Was it a pastiche, or was it?
No, it was a whole. It was definitely a whole.
So were there experimental pieces, or how did that like come together?
Nothing was experimental in the first like 7 months of submitting this as to chapbook competitions. It was traditional prose. The experimental only came after starting to pay attention to the guidelines for chapbook competition, seeing the words experimental prose. And then I deliberately went into the manuscript and I thought, where can I play? The key word for me here is play. That's what it is. That's what it feels like. That's what it felt like. I took a really kind of not easy story and I lightened it up, I think. I took an emotionally charged story and I made it playful. And I want to just add, and that reflects my marriage. My marriage is very playful. We've always been super flirtatious, competitive and flirtatious. Revision. The revision process is, I think you can revise all the time until you reach a point where you just can't see it anymore. And for me, what came towards the end before the experiment, separate from the experimental part, was really working on adjective, adverb, verb, really verbs. I would say I spent a lot of time either making sure I had the right verb or making up a verb. Again, that comes from Barbara Hurd.
We have 2 minutes left. I want to throw our 2 traditional questions at you. One is there a question what is the question that no one has asked you about your book that you'd like to discuss? And the other is, what advice do you have for writers who are just starting out? And go.
So I'm going to start with the last question. For anyone starting out, just do it. Nike had the best tagline. Don't go to your writing teacher and say, I don't know where to start, how to start, anything. Just do it. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I have no idea. I have not given it.
Come on, I sent you this in advance. Okay.
I will say this.
That's the answer. I asked you everything.
No. I will say this. A lot of people are not asking who was my target audience. And I think it's actually super interesting. My target audience is not Israeli and is not Jewish. I have been writing for years about Israel. Israel has been a huge muse for me. There's a lot to write about, and I do not write it for a Jewish audience. I am writing for the non-Jewish audience, for me, American, because it is so misrepresented in media and in on every level. And I'm writing from the place of being a flawed human being trying to live a peaceful life in a really complicated place that is very misunderstood. And I'm trying to show what it's like to live there.
So speaking as a French-speaking, non-observant Jewish American, I freaking loved your book, and that's a wrap.
Thank you. Thank you all.